you so much for jumping onto this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is cool.
Whereabouts are you? Are you in a studio there?
Oh yeah, this is my home studio. Oh, actually, I could show you something really cool. This is the home studio that my roommate had built. We even have like a little logo on the floor.
Oh,
We just got it installed, so I'm really excited to share it. It's called Secret Garden Studio.
I think back to front on the video. What is the actual name?
Oh, was it flipped? Oh, okay. Well, it's called Secret Garden Studios. We're in our well, it was a garage that had no electricity in it, and my roommate, he's from New Zealand actually. Um, I know it's not Australia, but I figured the sister country thing, and yeah, he had built this studio. We have like a vocal booth in here and everything.
Wow,
Yeah, and this is like the setup over here.
nice.
Yeah, it's a nice little home studio that we have going. We moved in here in July 2020, and it's been an ongoing process and just kind of started to finalize this year. So pretty excited about it.
Took a couple of years to get to that point.
Yeah, it was completely gutted. This whole thing used to be just bare bones, 2x4s, just a bunch of wood that he had scrapped up and put in a whole kitchen in there, and a little bathroom in there. We had to go through quite a process, and
Yeah.
I even sealed up the edges once we put some of the walls in. I like made sure that it's like extra soundproof and learned a lot about soundproofing, and because we live really close to an airport slash it's a highway, and it's
Right.
been a cool little learning process actually building the studio.
Yeah. And so is that where you'll do most of your workout of now?
uh for the most part, at least whenever I'm home and kind of doing just more production-y or mixing related work. I have had some people come over to do some tracking in the booth that actually works.
No.
We had some professional sound. Well, I'm blanking on it, but his name is Rory Flaherty. He used to work for PMC, and they professionally treated our space, so it sounds really good here for a home setup.
What was the like when you were envisaging this? What was the dream thing? Like, what were you like? Oh, we've got to have this. This is like the one thing which we need.
um, Well, I thought of this little cushion.
Okay.
I kind of helped design it. My roommate actually built this whole structure, and a skylight.
Nice.
That was pretty crucial. It's nice to have actual sunlight in a studio and not be in a dark, dark dungeon.
Has that been your experience for most studios? It's just dark.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's very hard to get a good, like properly treated, properly soundproof space with many windows and whatnot. So for the most part, most studios that you step in are do not have sunlight in there. Even them just don't. It's just it's kind of easier on the sound treatment process to do it that way.
Right. But I think because we've spoken to a few people on these streams and they've talked about having that light and how important that is. And because I guess from like a mental perspective, a mental health perspective, not always being in the darkness is really, really crucial. And I think it's interesting that a lot of people seem to be tweaking to that fact and actually taking steps to fix it.
Yeah, yeah, it's different. I think especially post pandemic, we've all been kind of being reminded of the crazy idea that we're human, uh, and not just 24-hour workhorses. And it's nice to just experience human things
Yeah.
like light and I don't know, outdoors, and
Nice.
you know, human again. So yeah, this was a really great addition to actually have sunlight, and at different times of the day. Well, I'm looking around a lot. I'm so distracted by the by the light. But it's nice to even just kind of. I'm starting to kind of tell time by how the light moves through the day, and I'm kind kind of getting the hang of that now. I'm like, wow, it's like I'm in the prehistoric times before clocks were ever invented. I know what time it is now.
That's awesome. I don't know. It's only, I'm thinking last Friday, I think, one of your releases that you worked on just came out. Nicole by Nikki,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
the album that you engineered. What's it like for, I know for release day for the artist is obviously such an exciting day. What about for the engineer? Are you sort of conscious that, that record's coming out today or coming out this week? And are you as excited about it as well? Is it on your radar?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'll be surprised by how many releases, I guess, get released and I don't know that it's getting released. Like recently I actually did something with Kuko and I didn't even realize the whole album was out. I'm like, nobody told me. Uh, yes, Nikki, I worked with her pretty closely and they do, you know, I work a lot with 88 Rising, the company. We're actually wrapping up some prep for, they have a music festival coming this weekend. So yeah, I'm definitely very well aware and they also promote very well. So I'm aware that, oh, these things are coming out, which is uh, really exciting. Yeah, it came out last Friday and it's especially cool because I've gotten closer with Nikki over this last year, and it's always much more exciting when you really develop a friendship and a relationship with the artist you work with. It makes it more exciting and more meaningful. Not that it isn't if you don't, but you know, you have more to look forward to. You're like, this is something that you take a lot of ownership of, and you have a relationship to kind of be a part of that too.
Totally, totally. And in the comments, Ali Galloway has just said, set your Jaxsta alert, which is one thing, of course, you can do. You can set your credit alerts so that you get an alert every time something you've worked on comes out.
Yeah.
So store that in your memory.
So I'm on it.
So what is there such a thing as a typical day for an engineer when you're working on Nicki's album or when you're working with HAIM or Olivia Rodrigo? Are there certain commonalities between each day that you'll have with them, or is every day different?
Every day's different. I talk about this a lot with friends who don't really know what I do. They're like, "What's it look like?" And I often tell them, "I don't know." Very rarely. I mean, as of this year, I've actually started to take more steps to actually plan ahead, and people are booking me more in advance now. But oftentimes, kind of like put these days on hold, and we're likely going to track something. And oftentimes, I mean, for a very long time, especially earlier on in my career, was I would actually purposefully leave my week empty because
Mhm.
I call last minute being like, hey, are you able to come in 3 hours at this little studio and engineer? And I would just have to say yes. And I actually kind of liked it that way for a while too, just kind of, you know, doing things spontaneously and then also getting to get paid for it
Right.
eventually.
I think that's really interesting because on the one hand, I imagine engineering is a very precise um, thing to do, and you've probably got the certain steps that you take each time, and
Yeah,
again, it's very precise. But then on the other hand, you also have to live your life to an extent really free and open and very flexible and adaptive. Which I suppose also comes in handy with engineering, right? Because you have to be able to adapt to certain situations. Is a certain mindset that you think you need as an engineer?
totally. It's so much of it, you know, it's such a technical job and it does demand quite a bit of technical and math and musical knowledge. But I think the biggest thing that has helped me when navigating, I just got a call. Let me
You
just,
got to call, right? That's okay. Hi.
am I back? Okay, sorry about that. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. Um, but yeah, you know, being able to be flexible and learning how to rein in chaos. I do think the job is quite chaotic. So if you work really well under pressure, it's a great it's a great quality to have in this kind of landscape, because there's so many things that could either go wrong or could change, and it's, you know, you just have to be really quick on your feet to either anticipate these changes or mistakes that could always happen, or just be able to respond quickly and to whatever arises.
Is that a skill that you've always had, or is that something that you had to develop?
Um, I think I have always lived quite chaotically. Well, I think part of it is also just having to fail so many times, and that's how you get better at reigning the chaos, because then you start to see the patterns of, oh, this thing looks familiar, or this person didn't like anticipate this thing. Let me try to make sure that we communicate and check in early. And so of course it didn't like very immediately go smooth sailing. I had to fall so many times and make so many mistakes in order to actually to get on that flow of being able to respond as quickly and calmly, because for a long time it was also a confidence thing of, whoa, I really don't know the answer to this, and just scrambling for an answer whenever there's some kind of mistake. And oftentimes it could be so simple as, oh, you didn't have this setting on Pro Tools, or, oh, this thing wasn't plugged in all the way. And it's you know, to be able to think under pressure, you need to be able to step back and think, all right, line of steps of order to and work backwards in a calm way, because so much of it, I thought I had silence everything. So much of it is just also, you know, kind of helping control, not control, but like rein in a room, because there's so many different personalities involved, and when they're in a certain flow, you don't want to get in the way with anything, or you don't want them to be distracted in their flow either. So to try to mitigate anything that you can ahead of
Yeah.
time is
So you're trying to
helpful.
think four or five steps ahead.
Yeah, ideally. And oftentimes you can't, there's just some things that you just can't anticipate, but just to, yeah, just be communicative and think on the fly is just always going to be helpful.
Yeah. In terms of, and not to focus on your mistakes, but in terms of maybe one or two learnings that you had to learn the hard way through making a mistake, which is the best way to learn, really, because then you know what to do differently next time. But is there kind of an example that you can think of where something didn't go to plan and then you actually were able to fix it from that point on?
um I think more often than not, it's always just a cable issue that you kind of, why am I not getting sound, or where is this noise coming from? Especially when I'm dealing with like, tracking bands, and when I worked with Ariel, we would use a lot of vintage mics and hardware that, you know, there could be a plethora of reasons why something is going wrong. So you just have to go in the line of order of, all right, first let's make sure this thing's plugged in, and the next step. But I mean, I think the biggest thing that I've learned to try to mitigate anything is that if I have any reservations or hesitations about anything that I'm not fully clear on, I've learned to just ask and to not be scared of stupid questions. Because as long as you haven't asked it before, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Uh, yeah, it's like you will save so much trouble and so much, I mean, for me, embarrassment by just asking things in advance. And, you know, people more often than not are always willing to help and willing to work things out with you, because we all, at the end of the day, we all have the same goal of just getting through the day, having a good uh, product somewhere by the end of the day, to have recorded what you need to record, everyone's happy, like that's the goal. So if you are just, you know, communicative about what you need, what you want more clarification on, and what you can help with, I think that'll always just smooth the process overall.
Yeah, that's such a great lesson, I think. Just ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask. I think that's really key.
Yeah.
Um, So in terms of you even getting to this point, I know you studied at the University of Texas, but was that audio engineering that you studied there?
Yeah, it was I would say it's a program that doesn't exist anymore, which is kind of a shame, but it was a program called Recording Technology that was relatively new, and we had worked out of a professor's home studio. This is in Austin, and this was quite deep into the naturey parts of Austin, and it was gorgeous. And you know, it's interesting having started in a, I guess not in a public school and also in a new program because they were still figuring out so many things. They asked me to take engineering physics, which was, I don't know if that was the best thing. It was a lot of pressure to be the only music student out of a bunch of pre-med and, you know, electrical engineering majors, but it was overall a good experience. I think higher education has its ups and downs, especially in America. And you know, you meet so many people who are like-minded, and it um, was a good stomping grounds to just to kind of get all the experimentation that you wanted to get in, and making all the really bad, stupid seeming mistakes on with people also are just clueless and just doing things together. And um,
Right.
yeah, and I often tend to not give my college experience a lot of credit, but I do realize I did. I mean, part of the reason why I kind of started to get into vocal producing is me realizing that I had a lot of friends who were singers in college, and I would try to record them, and they would ask me like, "Oh, you know, am I doing this right? Like, should I do it more like this or do like that?" And I think just being with peers where you can comfortably talk about and try to coach things and learn things together, I think that actually formed a lot of my understanding of how to work with singers. That, you know, I realized if I hadn't been in that environment where I was just around a bunch of singers, I might not have the level of insight that I have now.
Right. And that vocal production is such an interesting field because you know, you're dealing with artists who are really sort of expressing things from you know, deep inside, and I imagine those sessions can be quite emotional sometimes as well. How do you, was it just that period, was it just that process of starting and doing it that you learned to be able to adapt to different artistic types and to empathize with what the moment needs and what makes a good take and what needs to be redone?
Totally. I think, I mean, so much of it is it's almost like a just like a psychological journey, because you're kind of manipulating singers into kind of getting what you need out of them, not to say, and also to get them to feel comfortable enough to perform and express themselves in a way that's authentic and also sounds good. And so it's a big balancing act. And I think, I mean, largely I think just listening to a lot of music that I've loved, and that involves a lot of ballad singers and all kinds of different types of singers. I think I can always have used that as a reference to when I can't communicate in a way that I would know, like, because you know, every artist and singer has their own language around how they utilize their voice or what kind of sound they're going for. I remember, you know, referencing Mariah Carey, and people would have two different kinds of interpretations of what that means. Some people would be like, "Oh, it's a more icy thing," or it's a more like, "Oh, it's like when she goes like just super like kind of gravelly and windy." And yeah, everyone has. It's all such a subjective process, and to also just have that rapport with someone where you can take those steps to kind of learn their language and
Mm.
be able to talk to them in their language. I think that's just it just takes time and takes a lot of emoting and being, you know, vulnerable with each other in a process. It's a, yeah, it is a very emotional and vulnerable process, especially because the voice, it's such a delicate instrument. It's the only instrument that you have to use all the time.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I guess you also have to be conscious of the fact that maybe a singer just isn't in the right space today,
Hmm.
and they may not realize it, but you realize it. So you probably have to have some conversations, very delicate conversations. Is that the case?
Yeah. Uh, some people have their sessions booked and then they get into some horrible situation beforehand. I remember I was working with one artist who, right before our session, she had learned that all her files got deleted, or like the hard drive that had all the files for her album was missing, like
Oh, no.
flight somewhere, and she was just gutted, and she just knew she had to get through it. And it's just being able to understand the headspace that they're in, and like, all right, let's just do what we can. If you really are not in the space, then like don't force it. Like, it's better for all parties to just you know be, yeah, in the best headspace. So yeah, being sensitive to the artist's needs, because at the end of the day, especially with engineering and vocal producing, you are kind of providing a service, and you are trying to get um they're hiring you because they want you to get the best experience for themselves too. So
Yeah.
yeah, just being sensitive to different situations, and learning to respect people's boundaries and help them also set boundaries. And also, if they feel like they can push through, and if you think that they could push through, then also be mindful of yeah, it's always such a situational thing. It's hard to say, but it's oftentimes, you know.
Absolutely. Very nice comment in there from Unself to Self, saying you're so articulate and insightful. So yeah, thank you for all these thoughts, Jasmine. Just going back to University of Texas,
Mhm.
what even put you there? Like when did you start to realize that oh, there are people who make the music I like. There's a whole other world behind the artists that we see. When did you first come conscious of that?
Yeah, I it was actually in high school. So I've kind of done music my whole life. I started piano when I was 4. I started playing flute when I was 9, and went through the whole band, concert band, marching band, orchestra, that the whole shebang, from middle school onwards to high school, and until college a little too. I was in pep band, um, playing the piccolo, and it was. I mean, I think I had learned like a lot of the we went in band camp. Oh gosh, in band camp we would have instructors come coach us, and one instructor was actually a saxophone instructor, where he actually had been putting, he and his wife, they were like jazz saxophonists. Um, I think she also played keys. They were just a fun dandy duo, and she recorded out. They were like just putting out music all the time, of just the recordings of their saxophone and piano. And I had once at one point asked them like, "Whoa, like, oh, it was a career investigation thing from my senior year, where we had to interview someone who." Was it either in the space that you wanted to enter, and I realized, oh, well, they're the only ones that I see around me putting out music. Came from a high school that was very academic focused. Everyone's just being like business and like doctors, and the music didn't seem like a very viable career choice. But here I saw some people actually doing it. And yeah, I had asked him, and he gave me the whole rundown. Like, there's usually assistant engineer, there's an engineer, there's a producer, and there's mixing engineer and mastering. And actually, it was one time when so I was born and raised in Los Angeles County, uh, in the suburbs, and a common thing with Southern California kids is we get to go to Disneyland quite a bit.
Right.
And in Disneyland, we had this one concert where we were playing. They would often feature local high school bands and orchestras to play as just like extra entertainment throughout the park. And we would at one point, it was an orchestra thing. And before our performance, they actually gave us a walkthrough through their backstage. And
Wow.
actually a sound stage, which is like a film sound stage. And I think that's where they actually recorded a lot of the content that they would play out throughout the park. And we did one where we tried, we had learned the Lion King song. So we were playing some Lion King thing. We actually got to like play along to the screen while we were and it was a really cool experience. And I remember
Yeah.
they were saying, okay, and like here's our engineer, like Mike or whatever. And I looked at them like, oh, like they're everywhere. They're not just in studios. They're even in like these kinds of situations. Like engineers are everywhere. And so I started to look more into, you know, is this a viable career? Like, do people actually make money off of this? I thought that people just do it for funsies because I would. This is just fun. Like I would board people on. I had Audacity back in the day, in like high school projects where we would be asked to go above and beyond and make all these videos and stuff. People actually did, knowing that I was the music person. They were like, "Oh, do you want to like record all of our voiceovers?" And I thought, "Okay, sure." And
Yeah.
oh, people actually make a living off of this. That's cool. And I was always very technical, math, science minded. My dad was a physics teacher, and to combine, you know, the two subjects, and I thought, okay, that seems viable. And the reason why I chose UT though was actually I got a big scholarship to go
Okay.
there. And it actually made it cheaper than going to a California school because California was so expensive, um, even for a California public school. And I thought I wanted to, growing up in Southern California all my life, and knowing that if I were to truly commit to this career path, I'd probably be back here at some point. I thought Austin would be a great little new adventure to explore, and it was at the time that I kind of went back recently. It's changed quite a bit, but at the time that I was there and the 5 years that I lived there, it was quite a magical place to be where everything's very kind of DIY, and a lot of there it is like the live music capital in terms of, when there's a lot of bars and there's always live music playing. You'll have like some bluegrass thing in the corner, some country, and there's shows everywhere. And it was a very nice place to just see people just playing music a lot because they loved it. And
Mm.
and also it was such a great place to be for a broke college student. It was like $2 beers and shots. It was just a great time to be a young and broke college student in Austin. It's just, it was a good training grounds where I would think that maybe if you were to live in LA, you would not be able to afford as much of the fun and the experiences that you get to experience in Austin. So um,
Nice.
that was a really great experience. And funny enough, actually, a lot of the work that I get nowadays is in LA is a lot of it was because of my peers in that I've met in Austin who have all
Right.
here. And it's just the people you surround yourself with at the end of the day. And if they're like-minded, you'll probably end up in the same places. And yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. What was that decision to go into engineering and to sort of go into music? Did you like how was that received from your parents and your peers? I guess if you're at a very academic focused school and your dad had a career in the sciences, was there an expectation that you would follow suit? And were they surprised that the engineering was where you wanted to, or music, the music industry was where you wanted to go?
I think they weren't really surprised. They definitely were. I'm an only child, so they I think they were a little more supportive of like, all right, if you really want to do this, we'll support you, but consider grad school someday. And in my mind, I'm like, sure, I will. I love school. That's totally what I'm gonna do. I don't like it. But they were supportive, and also knew to drive the fact that you still got to learn to make money. You need to have basic survival instincts of having a job. And yeah, I somehow actually landed a paid internship with the Recording Academy in Texas.
Right.
I used to intern for them in college, and I actually went down a whole, this is kind of a tangent, but I actually went down a whole route of doing more like admin jobs. My first gig out of college was actually working in PR, music PR.
Okay.
The only thing that's willing to pay me right now. Uh, New York for a bit to try this out and realized, okay, no, this isn't because even in the surrounding environment of being amongst a bunch of musicians and people who are about to enter a music career, the opportunities weren't as plentiful there. And so even I had to kind of succumb to the pressures of like, well, maybe I need a real job. Even before my parents even suggested it, I just felt that pressure of, I remember when I had first accepted going to UT for the music program, I had to audition and all that too. I think I was actually almost embarrassed by it for a bit, being like, I'm about to major in music. Like, I know you're about to, make big strides as a pre-med MBA thing, but I want to try for music and figure out thing that I really have no idea how people get through this. And I'm going to do it in Austin, where where not really known to be like studio land of the world. I'm like leaving the place that has all the studios that I could be interning for. But I'm just trying to head over to Austin and just figure that out. And still somehow worked out.
I really did.
I eventually moved back here after like a 6-month stint in New York, realizing, what am I doing? I'm not trying to be a publicist. I hate writing emails. Much less write like 500 of them every day. And and that's how I kind of started my journey. And I was just surprised how many opportunities were available and how many people were looking to help each other too. Because for a while I thought it was very scarce and very competitive, but surprisingly, I think at the end of the day, everyone just needs a lot of help with stuff, and I wanted to help.
No, and to what you were talking about earlier, even with that Disneyland experience, you were starting to realize that engineers could be in various places, because
Yeah,
it seemed for that period after you moved back to LA, you did sort of move into various things, whether it be boom operating on
yeah,
film sets, or what else? OI Music Academy, working there. It seems like there was a bit of trying to figure out where you belonged. Was that what that period result was about?
totally. I for me personally, I have also come to accept that I do like a lot of variety.
Mm.
Um, so actually, a lot of my work, I actually do a lot of different roles for different people. I'm not just a main like audio engineer and vocal producer. I think I've to some people, especially my friends in Texas, because we had a big film program there. A lot of people knew me for film work, so I would kind of just hop on whatever is willing to pay me. And film sets actually, I actually really do love working on film sets. You have this sense of camaraderie of, a bunch of people just working for a day or working for like a week. And there's this community that you build, and there's just snacks and food abound all day. And it's just it's a fun environment to be in. It's a different environment from the usual studio where you're kind of locked in again in a dungeon, and kind of a lot of it's pretty insular. You're just either by yourself all the time or only with the same one or two people. And I did enjoy that variety of being in a crew of a bunch of people that I didn't know, and kind of learning that side of things, because clearly there's a big industry around there in LA too. And
Mm.
from there, I did learn so many things about unions, um, that music still doesn't really have much of, at least in the engineers or producers side, and also learning all the different routes that you can go down in the post-production or music world in film, where there's music editors, there's also the music supervision, like also the music supervision that's somewhat creative but more admin. There's like score mixing, there's jobs such as Pro Tools operator, which is actually very, very crucial in those large sound stages where they do large orchestra recordings. But that's something that, it's also very hard to get into field, mostly because I think people tend to be veterans that just kind of stay there, and
Right.
yeah, like the Supreme Court of the music engineering world. Um, People just stay forever because this job is so hard to get in the first place, and then you can just do it forever and still have like actually a very nice income, because film world actually pays better. In all honesty. And yeah, I mean, I still pick up boom operating jobs here and there. It's I I still enjoy the variety. I still, and also enjoy working with my friends in the film world, and I still do some sound design, sound mixing, like post-production mixing too. And especially with this space, I don't have to work. They can come to me. Like I don't have to be in like a particular studio to achieve that. So it's a it's a it's a cool experience getting to kind of fill my week up with different
Totally.
different worlds, and yeah, being of having a different purpose for different people.
Absolutely. Oh, that's very cool. And so, in terms of the audio engineering from the music perspective, when you think about those years where you're sort of trying to figure out where your place was and to navigate that, what was the first credit you got that kind of helped establish you? Was there one or a couple of credits that really helped get your foot in the door?
I think, I mean, so the way that I had started actually really properly racking up credits was through I started working at Heavy Duty, which is
Mm.
actually a publishing company, but it was co-owned by Ariel Rechtshaid, producer for like HAIM and Vampire Week and all of them. And he started this studio in conjunction with his publishing company to kind of, yeah, just have a space where everyone can collaborate with like each other. And he has the main big room that was kind of his, all of his equipment, all the vintage gear, and all the just plethora of drums and the big grand piano. And getting to kind of start to become the staff engineer there, like I would just be thrown, be like, Jasmine, someone's coming in now. Do you like go engineer? While I had to intern for a bit in order to really learn my ropes, and then eventually it just kind of happened where people were like, Jasmine, can you engineer this? And I had to just jump right into it. um,
Yeah.
the first very official credit that I actually saw that my name was in the credit was actually a rapper named Killy, and it was produced by one of the heavy duty producers, Jam City. He had brought me on, and he had liked how I mixed it, the vocals and all that. And even their mixer was like, "Can you send us the vocal chain? Everyone likes that one better." And that was the first time when I thought, "Oh, I'm doing something actually usable, and people like it."
Yeah.
Hitting record and like sending it off for so someone else can make it better, but I'm actually okay. I kind of understand what sounds good. And that was the first one that I was properly credited on. Um, I will say the first like big credit was actually for the Kelly Clarkson song, which
Right.
that day didn't know that was going to be happening at all. It was Ariel hitting me up being like, oh, so it was Jesse Shatkin, his like their childhood friends, which is really cool how that works. And he's like, "Oh, Jesse wants to come in and track drums. Can you set it up? He's coming in like 3 hours." And I thought, I was like, "Okay, sure." Didn't really know what to expect, but I also knew just the way that Ariel likes to set up his drums, and I kind of followed that template and also try to do some tweaks and while I was checking some sounds. And Jesse shows up, sends me the stems for us to track drums over, and it was for two songs. One was the Kelly Clarkson song, and then one was for Sia. And I hear these voices, I'm like, this is wildly familiar. I'm like, is this Kelly Clarkson? He's like, oh yeah, it's a Kelly Clarkson song. And I started to freak out. Mentally, I was keeping my cool because I'm like, all right, just do the job you came here to do. Just keep doing that. You were recording drums a second ago. You can still keep recording drums and not freak out about like, oh God, I have to deliver on a Kelly Clarkson song now. But that's totally what I was doing. I remember I even went to the bathroom. I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? What's happening? Like, am I just holding like Kelly Clarkson and Sia stems right now? That's just what's happening. Okay. And yeah, so much of it happens just like that. Just you get thrown off the deep end and realize what you're thrown into, and it actually works out okay. I mean,
Yeah.
I still have yet to confirm from Jesse like what exactly was good or not. He was like, yeah, this sounds fine. This sounds good. He wasn't particularly stoked. He's like, I needed live drums to add to it. But that was the first time when I realized, oh, that's you know, that world also is not too far away from me, which was,
That's
I felt very lucky to be in this space where it was just such a casual, we're just gonna come in and track some drums really quick, and then my name was on a Kelly Clarkson song, which is, yeah, it was a big jump from just working on random little things, and then it's like, oh, okay, now you have a Kelly Clarkson credit.
that's amazing. That's good. And so, how long after that does HAIM? Do you start working with HAIM? And is that through your Ariel connection?
Yeah, yeah. So that building that we were in, and it's now kind of changed a bit, but one of the rooms used to be Ariel's room. So that whole building, Heavy Duty's building, used to be Teamworks, which is Mad Decent. He and Diplo used to share the studio space. And his one room was actually the room that it's still there. It's Studio C. That was the room that he recorded the first Haim album in.
Right.
He like moved on to the big room, the big room that used to be their Mad Decent's photo studio, and they changed it into a proper recording studio. And I actually, when I first started at Heavy Duty, when I was first just interning, Danielle was actually just starting to write the album. And actually, that was actually, I haven't shared this with anyone before, but that was a selling point when Josh, my boss at Heavy Duty, he was giving me the tour of the studio, and I remember going to one of the rooms and then seeing her pick that had
Right.
initials on it, Danielle Haim, and I was such a huge Haim fan, have been since like 2014. I'm like, oh, whoa, that's Danielle Haim's pick just sitting there. Okay. I'm like, I'm still to this day such a huge fan. She's such a brilliant mind and so talented. And you know, that kind of sold me. I'm thinking, okay, well, that's cool. I'm working in a space that Danielle Haim likes to work out of. And I remember when I was first starting out, I, you know, wanted to let people know that I'm here to help and like let me know whatever. But Danielle would just lock herself up in the room and just be cranking out beats all the time. She was like cranking beats out herself and writing to it. And it was kind of cool to just see. I was kind of there. I started at Heavy Duty at the beginning of their album
Mm.
as an intern, and it's a very interesting and kind of mind-boggling process to think that I ended up as the engineer by the end of the process.
Yeah.
I started off as an intern. I'm like, I became engineer. Like I kind of grew with the album, which was fun to witness. Because you know, not only was I working on other projects at the time, but also was learning their process, was learning Ariel's setup, and was working with like he had three main engineers at the time. It was Chris Kasich, John DeBold, and Matt Damona, and they were kind of helping get me through the door too. And just because they just needed a lot of help. There's a lot that it's involved, even for three people, for four people, and eventually it became four people where I was just kind of like, I'll help like move these things around and like wrap up the cables. And eventually, yeah, I learned the ropes of how they like to set things up. And I, at that point, I had actually done quite a bit of work with like output, and I knew a lot about contact instruments because I was kind of helping them sound design, and I had actually tuned a bunch of the stuff in the back end of Contact, and they were making Contact kits, like drum kits, and I actually had said like, oh, I know how to make kits in Contact. So because I literally had just worked in the back end of making the software instrument that was analog brass and winds for output. And
Right.
so yeah, it was kind of just from that point that people they kind of started realizing, okay. And I had also told them the reason why I was brought on with outfit was actually because I have like perfect pitch, and so I was tuning a bunch of things randomly, and so they're like, oh, you want to like tune all these vocals? Okay, here you go. Like, you love tuning, great, here you go. And they were just kind of just offloading some of the workload, but for me that was a great learning experience as to what all is involved in the making of an album, and also proving to them that like, oh, I do have things to offer. I
Yeah.
help out in many ways, and yeah, eventually I was like fully tracking Danielle on drums and like Rostam on things and piano, and it was really cool to start from little to no knowledge of how to properly track drums when I first started there, into like fully knowing like exactly the mic I wanted to use, exactly the setup, exactly the snares, and
Yeah.
it was well, a lot of growth in that one album.
That's amazing. Do you remember the moment that did you get a physical copy of the album? Do you remember when it was all finished and you held a physical copy in your hands and you
Oh yeah.
thought, yes?
Yeah, I still have it. It's like a cool Urban Outfitters yellow version of it. Um, and I mean, it was released during the pandemic in June
Mm.
2020. So it was one of those, it was like a silent hurrah. We were like, yay, but we're all at home. It's just like, it's out. Cool. Can't do anything about it. Oh, well, actually, no, when the album was released, we had done a very, very extensively COVID safe live recording. That was one of the first super involved live recordings that we had to do in the beginning of the pandemic, where, you know, it was a time when everyone was just doing like NPR at home and like
Right.
radio show, like when you were trying to promote your album at a distance. It was such a whole new world of us trying to set things up, and also wearing masks and making sure everyone's testing. And it was
Yeah.
like very early stages pandemic of trying to coordinate the kind of promotional content you need to do, but with the restraints, constraints of, you know, getting sick. uh,
Wow.
it was such a maneuver, and we had recorded, we were doing a live stream at Cantor's Deli, which is a very famous deli in Los Angeles. And they, you know, the Haim girls, I think they were close friends with the owners. They actually, oh, they had one of that, Cantor's was actually their first venue that they ever played at when they were kids.
Oh,
That was like their first ever performance, I think. And so they were coming back and performing again, live streamed. They like sectioned off the whole second half of the restaurant for us to record it, and it was cool. It was a very complicated setup, and but at that point I was kind of used to that flow, and we did a few more. We did one with Jimmy Kimmel in front of the Forum in a parking lot, and then we did
right.
one for, I think it was Stephen Colbert at 3 a.m. That was probably the most involved one, because we had fog machines going, and we also had like 10 synths and 3 guitars going all at once, and drums, and like I forgot what's glockenspiel, and it was just a lot of things involved, and we were doing it at their childhood home in the backyard.
Ah,
So it was pretty fun to really explore all different avenues that really kind of represented Haim.
that's amazing. That's so great. I'm going to go check out all those live recordings on YouTube after this. Go and
It was like a lot to execute, but it was a really fun process for sure.
yeah. And last question about Women in Music Part 3.
Mhm.
The Grammy nomination. What did that mean to you?
That was cool. I didn't really know how that all worked. I mean, I kind of did, having interned for them before, but I didn't know that, uh, didn't realize that they would actually be qualified for Album of the Year. I thought like everyone was thinking like, oh, maybe it would just get Alternative Album of the Year type of thing. Um, but that was pretty huge, and it really didn't occur to me that, oh, I guess I would call myself Grammy nominated at this point. It just kind of hit me weird. I didn't believe it for a very long time. Definitely imposter syndrome. I'm like, I don't, what? I'm supposed to say that now? Like, oh, like my roommates are like, yeah, you better put that in your bios and stuff. And me being like, oh, I don't know. It wasn't like the girls, or you know, I wasn't, it took me a while to kind of settle into it, especially because I, you know, started that album not knowing most of the stuff I did by the end of it. Um, and it felt, you know, kind of a strange process, because, yeah, it's not like I engineered the entire time. I grew into the role kind of like throughout the process. Um, and, but yeah, and then it was just kind of eventually learning to just accept that, yeah, I did work really hard to be a part of this team, and I think we all valued each other's company. We all had a flow of working together, and it was really cool. And I mean, I also love working with women, and there were local Valley girls. I was from the other valley. I'm from the San Gabriel Valley, so it's always nice to kind of feel like it's a hometown vibe, but then elevated on such a high platform.
Jasmine, you've been so generous with your time. There's one more credit I just want to ask you about, and that's Olivia Rodrigo working on Sour. I think it's the tracks Deja Vu and Jealousy, Jealousy, I think in particular.
Yeah.
What was, did you have any sense that that record was going to do what it went to do as you were working on those songs?
We had no idea. It was with Dan Nigro. So Dan also was part of Heavy Duty for a while, like signed to them as a producer. And I think he was also heading the Heavy Duty project side, which is where they do custom music for ads and TV, film. And yeah, it was kind of another thing, kind of like the Jesse situation where they're like, oh, Dan wants to use the studio, track some drums. I'm like, all right. And I was, helped set it up. Chris was mainly doing a lot of the adjustments. Chris has been a mentor of mine. Just really learned. He has just a wealth of knowledge about all these mics and all these different techniques, and he has taught me so much about engineering, especially with drums, and I mean every instrument, really.
No.
Um,
Well, what's Chris's surname? Sorry.
Kasych, Kasych.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was him and I. We were just getting the drums done, and I remember when Dan was first describing it, because he had worked with several, like with Conan Gray's album, which that was also the reason why I was on those credits too. He had been working with several different artists that were kind of in that same vein, so we were like, oh, it's kind of similar thing. And I remember he was saying like, there's this girl who was in High School Musical, the musical, or whatever. Like, there's that whole show or movie just has this long title, and he's like, yeah, so we're just gonna track some drums for her. And I remember when that day was actually really funny because Ariel had just bought a ton of toms.
What?
And we had to set up. I need to post that picture at some point of just toms that like we laid out. We're like, yeah, let's just try all these toms anyway. I don't know if much of it actually ended up in the recording. I don't think we actually used all the toms. We did do some tom overdubs, but I don't think we actually used. They were like smaller toms that we would have around. But yeah, there was just a bunch of new drum toys that Ariel had just bought, and we were messing around with a bunch of it. And Sterling, the drummer, he had a bunch of tools. He actually taught me a lot about drums too. Like for one, Ariel had picked up this kick Speed King pedal for like a kick drum pedal that he said, this thing is 100 years old. Like it wasn't called this up until like 1920. Like it stopped being called this in 1920. So we had like this 100-year-old pedal and like all these like kind of gnarly pieces of equipment that I had gotten so familiar with and was learning a lot through the drummer who was teaching me all these things and also like playing on it. And yeah, I remember when we first heard the song, I loved Deja Vu. And I told Dan, like, this song is really good. And Dan always has just such good songs on his repertoire. It's just like, oh, damn, this is good. I really hope this is like, I hope people start to realize like what Dan's doing. It's so good. He's such a
Yeah.
guy, and surely enough, that blew up, and it was really kind of wild to just like have been a part of it, and knowing that like, oh, well, my gut instincts are right because I loved the song so much, and
Nice.
it seems like something that I guess a lot of other people loved it too.
Absolutely. So is that quite often how things work, where someone might come in and just track drums for, like you were talking before about those stems that you had of Sia and Kelly Clarkson? Is it so? It's not so much that the artist is going to be in there that day, but the drummer has a very specific thing, and we just need to get that drum track, and then that gets sent somewhere else. And
Yeah.
is that how it kind of works?
It's a lot of like separate parts and redubbing. So yeah, I never actually got to work with Olivia directly, nor Kelly Clarkson or Sia. That would have been great. But yeah, a lot of it is retracking, dubbing, because you know, especially I feel like the artists are definitely way more involved when it's in the writing process, and so you get what you can out of there, but then later on when you're actually trying to finish the project, that's when the actual, you know, honing in on the sound and being really
Mm.
selective. I mean, we use tape machines and making sure that we're like also incorporating the tape machines and doing these kinds of compressors. Like that's where the real, like very technical focus starts to kick in, is in the
Yeah.
this. Lucky enough for the HAIM album, you know, the girls play the instruments, so I actually was working with them directly the whole time, and it's always so cool to just to see like this family band just tracking all the stuff that they play, and
Totally.
because oftentimes it's, I mean, sometimes we'll use studio musicians to fill in some like harder parts, especially because you know it takes time to actually learn it, and it's just like let's just get it done, like one and done. Get a studio musician to just play the part really quickly and get it done. And yeah, it was a really cool journey just being in that space and seeing how many different kinds of producers go about their finishing slash writing slash creating.
Yeah. Yeah. Jasmine, that's been such an amazing opportunity to talk with you. Thanks so much for all your time and for, I mean, there's so much more I could ask you about, but I think maybe we need to do a part two somewhere down the road,
So
if that's
yeah,
with you.
so fun and getting to talk to you. You're so jolly and it's such good energy. Yeah, I loved doing this. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jasmine. Really appreciate it. And thank you for your support of Jaxsta as well. And really look forward to chatting with you again sometime soon.
Yeah, same. Thanks
All
again.
right. Have a great night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.